51. Andre said you could stand near any construction site in Tabula Rasa and see the massage trucks crawl past, stopping to pick up clients at break time. He led them down in the black panel truck and programmed in its disguise. When the graphics faded in, it literally had massage in sarcasm quotes. Madame Lestrade's Magic Relaxation Massage. The logo in pink letters that followed the contours of a naked woman. Prostitution was legal in the city, of course, but the fact that the trucks offer legit massages gave the customers plausible deniability for the wives and girlfriends who should notice their man climbing out of one. Vices were legal, but Blink made it damned hard to indulge in secret. Andre said, "The construction crews walk over from a makeshift dorm every shift. We just gotta catch them on the way in." Zoey said, "Guys, this is the single most conspicuous vehicle in America. It literally has a naked butt on it." Will shook his head. "The hardest part will be fighting for space with the other trucks. We'll be indistinguishable from the rest of the ass fleet." "Really? That many guys want mobile whores at 6 in the morning?" Andre said, "Well, the construction dorms have group bathrooms. No privacy, if you know what I'm saying." She didn't. A short time later, they were all piled in the truck, parked about 10 feet from a charred patch of pavement where a helicopter had crashed the evening before, and in the shadow of Molech's own headquarters, probably no more than 100 yards from the man who could vaporize them with the flick of a wrist. Will had assured her this was actually the one spot Molech wouldn't think to look for them, but Will's good intention lies were always the most half-hearted. Zoey, Echo, and Will sat on a red leather sofa that ran along one wall of the truck, opposite a bank of feeds that played on the other. Will had changed into a suit with the color and texture of a newly paved road. Echo was wearing a black catsuit with a series of belts crisscrossing at the waist. It was the sort of thing Zoey wouldn't have had the confidence to wear in a daydream. Wu stood guard by the door. Bud and Andre were leaning against the bar, the latter eating a leftover pork chop he found in the bar's mini-fridge. They all watched the feeds as they scanned the passing workers, returning facial recognition profiles in real time. Bud said, "Now, what we want is the foreman, a fella named A.J. Skelnick. Tall, white, bad posture, balding in the back." They found him 3 long minutes later, a pale, slumped-over man who trudged along the sidewalk like he was heading to his own funeral. Zoey thought it wasn't like there was any denying the nature of the job he had taken at this point. Echo hopped out of a sliding side door to intercept him. She whispered something in the man's ear, and he made a beeline for the truck. Zoey shook her head and said, "We're all fortunate she uses her powers for good." Skelnick climbed into the truck, looked around the interior, and froze when he saw the suits. Zoey said, "We're gonna watch, if that's okay." Echo closed the door. Will said, "Do you know who I am?" Skelnick nodded. "I ain't got nothing you want. I don't know nothing you want to know. They find out I talked to you, just this much we've talked so far, they'll kill me, and they'll kill me for days. But you know that, don't you?" Will, showing no sympathy, said, "These are the risks we take when we choose the wrong employer." Zoey said, "You're working for the bad guy, the worst guy." Skelnick scoffed and glanced around the truck interior, briefly making eye contact with Wu. "Not like you guys, huh? Arthur Livingston, great philanthropist. His warehouse that blew sky high. Well, he was probably making porridge for the orphans in there, right? Spare me all that. Ain't no heroes in this city." Zoey threw up her hands and said, "Hey, I'm not even from here, and a week ago I was working at a coffee shop. I'm just regular folk, and I'm telling you you're getting paid in dirty money." "Coffee shop? So you're a drug dealer? You think folks are paying $10 a cup because they like the taste? I've seen documentaries about where they grow the beans, too. Some of the workers young enough to call you grandma. I don't care who you are. Trace your paycheck back far enough, and you find it's all dirty money. Let me out." Will said, "Fine. Think of me as another employer bidding on your services. At least listen to my offer. Besides, if you leave now, it'll look suspicious. The average massage truck session is 8 minutes." Zoey said, "Our job will pay enough that you can retire. Hire your own massage trucks to follow you wherever you go." Skelnick kept his eyes on Will. "You know how I interview prospective employees, Mr. Blackwater? I ask him one question. I say, 'Show me your knife.' Man don't got a knife, I got no use for him. It's the universal tool. Even apes know how to keep a sharp stone within reach. Then if he shows me his knife, I scrape it on my arm to test the edge. See if it'll shave the hair off. If the blade's dull, I say, 'Get out of here. You only got one tool on you and it don't work. But mine, it'll circumcise a fly.'" Skelnick reached behind him, and suddenly there was a gleaming blade in his hand. "You know I gotta try to kill you, right?" Will showed so little reaction to this that it took a moment for Zoey to register what the man had said. Wait, what? Wu edged forward, but Will just sipped his drink and said, No reason you can't listen to what I have to say first. Zoey said, Hey, no, nobody's killing anybody. Skelnick said, I tell Molich about this meeting and tell him anything other than that I slit your throat. He turns me into a hamburger. Will said, You ever killed a man with a knife? It's harder than you think. Your chances of success are extremely low with that course of action. So you see the predicament you put me in by luring me into your vehicle. Looks like that was a bad move on your part, because my best case is I give Will Blackwater scars he's got to explain every time he takes his shirt off for a lady. Andre said, If Molich's people knew we were here, this truck would already be a smoking wreck. There's nothing suspicious about any of this from the outside. You just gotta listen and walk out that door with a spring in your step. Then you got 1 minute to say your piece, at which point I'm gonna turn you down because a millionaire hamburger is still a hamburger. Will brought up a feet on the wall opposite the sofa, a street-level view of the naked city where they'd had their meeting/standoff the previous evening. You know that place, Mr. Skelnick? Driven past it. Place for slick-haired cuckolds who got cash but still gotta pay for pussy. You know who owns it? Don't know. Don't care. Molich. Through a corporate front. What you're seeing there, the visible part of the building, that's not what makes the real profit. The real money comes below ground. See, there's a rumor that you show a special little card at the front door, made of solid gold, they say, and you head downstairs, down to the real club. Bud said, We've never been down there, but they say that with each sub-basement the girls get younger, and there are several floors, if you get what I'm saying. You don't gotta convince me that Molich is a sick Will said, Look, there. You see the concrete in front of the main entrance. Let me zoom in. You see it? I see concrete, yeah. You see the cracks? All through the middle there? Yeah, whatever. You know what causes that? Dry Utah air, probably. Leaches moisture out of the wet concrete before it can cure. Gases. From the decomposing bodies. Get a jackhammer and bust up that concrete and you'll find bones. At least 40 bodies of the building's construction crew. And their families. Migrants, mostly. See, Molich couldn't have them walking around out there, knowing about those secret basements, spreading rumors about their intended purpose. So on the last day of the job, he lines everybody up, and one by one they get a hollow point severance to the back of the skull. Buries them out front, before they pour the concrete, like a ritual. They say it was because he heard the pharaohs used to bury the slaves in the shadow of the pyramids, for good luck. Think about it, Mr. Skelnick. You say you don't know anything, but he's not going to risk it. For every man and woman on your work site, this is their last job. Skelnick stared hard at the screen, studying the cracks in the walk, imagining the expanse of dry bones that Zoey was pretty sure weren't there. Will said, Can you deny the logic of what I'm saying? You're saying I got a narrow chance living either way. Only your way I stand to make more money on the way out. No, interjected Bud. We can get you out. You and anyone who want to bring along. We got a big old people mover network. It's what we do best. New name, new start. Molich won't find you. You and your daughter both. They had been saving the daughter thing for now, Zoey thought. She watched the man's fingers tighten on the knife he was still gripping in his right hand. Wu's eyes never left that hand. Will said, So to start, just tell us what you know, even if it doesn't seem useful. The man chewed on his lip, then said, Job came back in August. Boss told me it was a cash-paying job for a kid who had bought the old casinos and wanted them built back up in the shape of his own head. Andre said, His head? You mean literally? The man nodded. Wanted both to be made of obsidian. One carved to look like the guy's own face, scowling. The other would be a giant middle finger, like he was flipping the whole city the bird. I thought it sounded shady, and said as much. I mean, it's one thing to get a building made into your own face, but then you insist the face be scowling. You can't be up to anything good. Ain't nobody gonna stay in a hotel where a big, angry obsidian face on the front. Zoey thought she would totally stay in a place like that, but didn't want to contradict him. We had to talk him down from actual obsidian. You can't get it in those quantities, and it's impossible to work with. Impatient, Echo said, What's your interior access like? Zero. That's the point I'm trying to make. I came up with a way to do a facade out of a rigid polyurethane foam. We just put it up in blocks and then got these remote-controlled grinders that crawl up the front and sculpt the guy's face into it. And then we'll do a black glaze. Should do a good job of hiding the fact that the building behind it is junk. And it is junk. We're not renovating the interior. It's a burned-out wreck. All the work has been done on the outside. It's all for show. Will said, Well, we need to get inside with the camera. We'll tell you what you're looking for. When you find it, we'll tell you what to do. You get caught, you just say you got lost, you're looking for some duct tape. Play dumb. Right, and maybe I'll crawl through an air duct like James Bond, cut through a window with a laser watch. Do I fit the profile of an imbecile in your eyes, or did you just figure out you had nothing to lose by asking me to go on a suicide mission on your behalf? Here, how about we switch clothes and you go into the lion's den? Your minute's up. Let me out. Echo was blocking the door. Stay a little longer. Your friends will be impressed with your stamina. Will said, We're giving you a way out. Your only way. And what about the rest of my crew? Got more than 20 guys up there. They got kids too. You can get them all out? Yes. If I go inside and help you sabotage Molech's operation? Yes. And if not, then whenever we finish the job, Molech dumps me and all the rest in a mass grave. Yes. The man stared at the floor, then at the feed. Before he could answer, Zoey said, No. Zoey felt Will staring at her now and could somehow feel him clenching his jaw. She said, We'll get you and your people out either way. We're asking for your help, as a favor. The man's expression changed. He was clearly trying to figure out if this was some good cop, bad cop scam Zoey and Will were running, but then he looked at Will, who was just barely restraining an urge to strangle Zoey. It didn't matter how hard he tried to play the robot. His thoughts might as well have been flashing across his forehead in scrolling red letters. You just took our leverage and flushed it down the toilet. Skelnick said, I'll think about it. Let me out. Echo looked at Will, who nodded in resignation. She stepped aside and Skelnick stepped out into the chilled morning air, still wielding his knife. There was actually another guy waiting outside the door for a massage, but at the sight of the knife he backed off, presumably figuring that whatever was going on inside the truck, he didn't want anything that kinky so early in the morning. Once the door was closed, Will emptied his drink and said, Well, that was very generous of you. He glanced toward the front of the truck and said, Take us home. As they pulled into traffic, Zoey said, He said he'd think about it. Bud said, In my travels, that's meant no, exactly 100% of the time. Zoey sighed and stared at the wall feed. It was acting like a window now, showing the morning traffic passing by. Zoey's only sleep in the previous 20 hours had been that brief, fitful bathtub nap, and exhaustion was catching up to her. Echo was leaning in the corner, eyes closed, holding on to a rail on the wall so she wouldn't topple over at the next stop. Wu actually looked like he had positioned himself to catch her if she did. Zoey turned to Will and could see it creeping onto his face, too. Just a slight drooping of the eyelids, a blankness in the pupils. They were running down, like batteries, and time was running out. Will saw she was looking and sat up straighter, tightening the knot of his tie. It was silver and black, in a pattern that reminded Zoey of chainmail. Afraid to so much as loosen it for comfort's sake, as if his suits and ties were the source of all his powers. Then, the idea hit her, all at once. Zoey said, Andre, is there any chance your crazy designer brother Trey would know who Molech uses as a tailor? There was a pause, as if Andre was trying to process this nonsense question. Your words sound like you're making a joke, but your face is all serious. I am serious. Zoey, the dude doesn't even wear shirts. Why would he have a tailor on staff? He doesn't have one on staff, that's my point. But he's had to hire one within the last few weeks, or maybe even the last few hours. Why? Zoey made an exasperated sound. To make him a supervillain costume. Duh. Both Andre and Will started to make some dismissive joke, then stopped themselves. Zoey continued. Come on, you think he's going to carry out his flamboyant terror attack on the world in ripped blue jeans and a backward baseball cap? No, he needs a suit, and I guarantee you there's nobody in that building capable of creating one that wouldn't look like a child made it. I bet whoever he hired, they've been inside the headquarters for a fitting, and that Molech has talked to them as recently as last night. Bud fussed with his phone, Echo now snoring softly in the corner. Finally he looked up and said, Contracts with Ballistic Couture. They worked out of that shop in West Hills. One that looks like it's floating. Finished costume was supposed to be delivered this morning. Zoey said to Will, Okay, you have to admit that despite my faults, I am the smartest person on planet Earth. Will said, This time, you let me do the talking. In fact, why don't you just stay behind in the truck while I go in? How about instead, this time you actually tell me what the plan is before we start the conversation? We won't know until it starts. You have to find out how the person wants to present themselves to the world and work back from there. The LOB guy wouldn't have gone for the same amount of money if I'd offered it as a check. You cut that guy and he bleeds Mountain Dew. That's somebody who needs a treasure hunt. So here, Ballistic Couture is run by a designer named Aziza Richards. She's a character, and deals exclusively with clients who want designer suits that can withstand a burst of high-velocity assault rifle rounds. We're asking her to betray the trust of a client, but she gets caught doing that once she's out of business. And as soon as she's not valuable to these people anymore, she's dead. So that's the image she wants to project to the world? That she doesn't mind making a uniform for a new Hitler? Yes, and in fact, her entire livelihood depends on it. So how do you convince a person like that to do what you want? Let's just say there's a reason I want you to stay in the car. What? No, Will, we don't do stuff like that anymore. Will didn't reply. Zoey said, I'm going to take a nap on the way there. Do you mind if I lean over on you? I'll stand. 52. When she awoke, they were rolling through a row of boutiques and storefronts that seemed too weathered and dilapidated for a city in which literally everything was new. Zoey wondered if they'd been built in that style, artificially aged to imitate the feel of some artsy neighborhood in New York. The Ballistic Couture shop really did look like it was floating. The shop itself was done in olive green, to look like an armored military headquarters. The first floor, however, was a wraparound LED screen programmed to always show the view from a camera on the opposite side of the building. Zoey could see people walking past on the sidewalk behind it, as if the shop was hovering 10 feet off the ground. The first sign that something was wrong was when they turned in and were greeted by a sight that was common in every city but Tabula Rasa: police cars. One squad car with red and blues flashing, another unmarked sedan next to it with a light on its dash. Standing next to the latter and tapping things into a tablet was Kowalski. He glanced up at the truck as it approached and motioned for it to turn around. When it stopped and he saw who was climbing out, he looked mildly annoyed, like his day had just gotten a little harder. There was smoke drifting out of the main entrance of the shop. Zoey stepped out and immediately thought, "Sor cu dinti." It's a Romanian phrase a social worker had taught her years ago. It meant a day that looks bright and inviting when viewed through a window, in which the air is actually cold enough to burn your face when you step out into it. It translated literally to sun with teeth, unless the woman had been lying to her. For some reason, that phrase kept bouncing around in her mind as she walked up to the squad cars, watching a pair of uniformed cops stretching crime scene tape across the building entrance, which appeared to be a freestanding door without walls to hold it up. She glanced back at the truck and noted that the current disguise was that of a diaper cleaning service. Kowalski looked up at the approaching suits and said, "This ought to be good." Zoey said, "So, are the police back in business?" Kowalski said, "For those who pay. Aziza Richards was paying. Figured the least we could do was work the scene." Bud asked, "Where is she now?" "That depends on whether you believe in the existence of the human soul, Bud. Perhaps she is in heaven, making bulletproof tunics for the angels themselves. But me, I'm pretty sure she's just a pile of guts splattered on her office wall." Zoey let out a gasp of horror. Will let out a sigh of annoyance. Andre said to Zoey, "It was still a good idea. Just had it a couple hours too late, that's all." Kowalski said, "You here to see me, or were you here to see the pile of guts?" Will said, "The guts." She was making gear for Molech. I guess he took delivery of the finished product and decided to sever the relationship. Hell, maybe he just didn't want to pay. Zoey said to Kowalski, "There you go. Crime solved. Go arrest Molech." Kowalski shrugged. This feels like a self-cleaning oven type situation to me." Will said, "We're going inside." "It's a room full of smoking offal, Will. You're just going to get it all over your shoes." "Did you see a phone in there? I want to see if there's correspondence with Molech. Anything that can give us an edge." "Oh, so you're trying to fight this guy. Got it. You have any special requests for me when I process your corpse tomorrow? And don't ask us not to make fun of your dick, because we do that with everybody that comes through. That's how we cope." Will ignored him, already heading toward the front door. He turned to Zoey and said, "You don't want to see this. Watch the truck." And that, of course, meant she had to go in. She didn't throw up at the sight of the charred, bloody remains. She'd braced herself for that. She also didn't throw up at the smell, though that was a close one. No one had warned her that when you explode a person's body, all the feces spills out, and no one could have accurately described what that smells like when mixed with the stench of burning hair. No, she managed to hold it together right up until she saw the photos. The first room was a reception area with a black marble desk. Behind it was the entrance to the spacious production floor beyond. Molech, or his men, had picked up their order and then simply killed every single person on their way out, including the receptionist at the front desk. You could tell nothing about the victim from what was left, but the photos on the desk told the story. Middle-aged woman, had looked like a school teacher. She had a husband who looked like a chubby accountant, and they had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. Oldest was in his early teens, youngest was kindergarten age, and had adopted an adorable Chinese girl. The largest photo was one of those posed photographs you can get done at the mall, everyone in their Sunday best in front of a generic backdrop. Only the photo she had kept was the one in which everyone had broken their pose. The baby of the group had spontaneously reached up and stuck a finger in her big sister's nose, and the photo was a blurred mess of laughing siblings and reaching limbs. That was the photo she'd chosen to keep at work, and it was wonderful. Zoey made it outside the front door before she vomited. But then, when it was over, she stood up and went back inside. She immediately met Will, already on his way back out. He said, "They made it a point to destroy Aziza's phone. They knew they were tying up loose ends here. Let's go." Zoey didn't go. She pushed through toward the production floor, a spacious room that smelled of paint and glue, with walls packed tight with finished costumes on display, and a floor crowded with mannequins adorned with suits in progress. Everything from bulletproof tuxedos to beautifully sculpted riot armor. Bud and Andre were looking over a pair of shattered corpses along the rear wall. Zoey surveyed the room and said, "Their computers are still intact over there. Is there anything on them?" From somewhere behind her, Echo said, "Those are design workstations, so they can model the looks before they spend the money molding the carbon fiber. Nothing that looks like client records, but that would have been surprising anyway. This is a cash-only business. Most of these clients don't want a ledger kept. You think the design for Molich's suit is on one of them?" Bud said, "Reckon so, but what good does that do us?" He wasn't asking that as a rhetorical question. He was asking Zoey honestly, wanting her to tell him what good it would do. She turned to Andre. "If we got a copy of the plans for the suit, could Trey make us a replica?" "Trey can make anything. What's your plan?" "Wouldn't Molich hate it if he spent weeks having a custom outfit made for his coming out party, and then somebody showed up wearing the same thing?" 53. By mid-afternoon, the ballroom was a disaster area. They had dragged in tables from all over the house, and across them was strewn a colorful scatter of random objects, some of which were recognizable. Zoey had personally seen the caterpillar machine disgorge a clock, a spatula, and what looked like a sex toy, and some of which were tangled, oddly shaped tools and or weapons that looked like they had come out of a flying saucer or a Dr. Seuss cartoon. Many of the items had been labeled with masking tape and marker, bearing the team's best guess as to what the gadget did. There was a black, vaguely trumpet-shaped device that had been labeled simply Death Horn that she had decided not to ask about. All of this clutter was sprawling out under the mass of hanging candy canes and mistletoe, fighting for floor space with whimsical edible floor displays. Zoey had started calling it Santa's workshop. The problem was that a lot of the gadgets on the coin drive turned out to be pure junk, seemingly random objects that, as far as she could tell, were just placeholders Sean had scanned in to calibrate his fabricator. Since the file system on the drive was unreadable, they were having to just frantically stamp out everything on the list and pray they stumbled across something useful. The door to the courtyard opened, and Andre and Will walked in. Andre tossed aside a device that looked like a handheld spotlight. Zoey said, "Well?" "No, it's not a fart ray, Zoey. The next one won't be either. There's no such thing." "Damn." Echo, who was busy poking at the caterpillar's menu, said, "We're no closer than when we started. 15 hours until Molich's deadline, and that's assuming he keeps to it." Zoey said, "No closer to what? If we're not just looking for a bigger, badder gun to obliterate Molich's army with, what exactly are we looking for?" Will said, "I guess I'm looking for the One Ring." Zoey said, "The what ring?" "The One Ring. Like in Lord of the Rings." "I think I saw part of that on cable. It's about a little British kid in glasses who can do magic." "Are you seriously telling me you haven't heard of—" "Okay. It's about an evil wizard who makes 20 magic rings and gives them to all the leaders of the various tribes in the world. But it's all a scam, a power grab. The wizard kept one ring for himself, and it controlled all the rest." Zoey said, "And Arthur is the dark wizard in this scenario?" "He had to know what he was doing would end up this way. He did know, as you pointed out. But he had no safeguard built in. This stuff just falls into the hands of the bad guys, then his plan was what exactly? But Arthur didn't give this stuff away. It was stolen from him. Maybe he just didn't anticipate that part. Arthur anticipated everything. So, again I ask, in the absence of this machine literally generating a magical object, what's our plan? Candy blinked into the room and said, "A guest is at the front gate, and it looks like boob, don, boob, titty, titty, titty. Audio not found. Please contact your system administrator." A voice said, "Yo, it's Dre. Open the gate. I don't want nobody seeing me here. You got weird enemies, Dre." 54. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Zoey trudged up to her bedroom, looking to lay flat for the first time in 24 hours. They had worked straight through, and her brain felt like a hunk of raw hide a dog had been chewing on. She collapsed onto the bed in the guest room, kind of wanting to get back in that huge bathtub, but not having the energy to get up and run the water. She kicked off her jeans, curled up under the comforter, and waited for Stench Machine to settle in next to her face. Then she grabbed her phone off the nightstand and dialed her mother, not altogether surprised that she immediately answered. Nobody was sleeping tonight. "Zoey, my God, this is so crazy, right?" Her mother was stretching out the last syllable of every sentence. "Right?" Something she did when she was high. "I've never been nailed into a box before." "Mom, where are you?" I'm in a cabin in some kind of resort, I think. I have 3 armed guards outside, or 4. They all look alike, and they won't let me out. Bud goes and gets the food at mealtime, but he won't tell me what's going on, and..." She drew out the word "and" until she just gave up on the sentence. Zoey assumed she had a vape in her hand. Bud had been dispatched 8 hours earlier to oversee the logistics of getting Molech's construction crew out of the state, and then to shepherd Melinda Ash to a safe house in which she would, to put it frankly, sit and wait to see if any of the good guys survived. In the background, Zoey heard Bud ask what she wanted on her pizza. Zoey's mother answered, "Gummy bears," and giggled. Zoey said, "Well, I'm glad you're all right. This whole thing just keeps getting crazier. The people who live here seem pretty used to it, though." "Honey, why didn't you just get out of there?" Again, there. "The bad guys can afford plane tickets too, Mom. That's why you're out in the middle of nowhere. We have to see this through. This isn't like getting away from one of your old exes. There's no place I can go that these people can't follow." "Are you talking about Jezza? Did you hear about him?" "What? No, why would you bring him up?" "Well, you know he was the one you had the problems with when you burned your shoulder on the oven?" "Yes, Mom. I had not forgotten about that." "He committed suicide in his jail cell. They found him this morning. Isn't that crazy?" Zoey started to answer, but couldn't process what it meant. "It's like everything goes nuts all at once." "Mom, I think this is all going to be over in the next day or so. If something goes wrong, not that it will, but if it does, Bud will take you to an airport, whatever one you want, and put you on a flight. You pick which one. You'll keep using that account they gave you. It's supposedly untraceable and has, well, infinite money in it." "What? Where am I supposed to go?" "Wherever you want." "And where will you be?" "Come on. You know what I'm saying here, Mom." "I'm not spending the rest of my life running Z. I've got friends. I've got Marnie and her kids here." "If you don't, they'll find you. These guys aren't the type to forget." "What guys?" "Just promise me you'll go. Promise me." And then Zoey was crying. Her mother let out a breath, presumably through a cloud of steam, and said, "Everything's gonna be fine. Things always work out in the end for us." There was a knock at Zoey's door. "I have to go, Mom." "All right, honey." "I love you." "I love you too. And don't forget to..." "No, Mom. If this is the last time we ever talk, I want that to be the last thing we say to each other. I want to leave it at that. So I guess we need to say it again. You've always been my best friend and the best mom you were capable of being under the circumstances. And I love you." "I love you too, honey." "Goodbye." "Goodbye. And don't forget to take those cranberry pills or else you'll get another urinary tract infection." "God damn it, Mom." She was talking to a dead phone. A voice behind the heavy guest room door said, "Can I come in?" It sounded like Will. "Sure, I mean, I'm crying and I'm not wearing pants, but who cares at this point? A pause. Can you put some pants on, please? I will not. I'm under the covers. Get over it. Will entered apprehensively. It's all set. If everything goes south, a Pinkerton has instructions to get your cat to a safe location. Do you think he'll actually do it? He didn't take the assignment seriously until he saw what it paid, and he won't get the other half of his check until he brings proof of cat life to the attorney, so I don't see why not. Zoey said, It's a good thing I'm so exhausted, or else the fact that I probably won't be alive at New Year's would be seriously weirding me out right now. You can't focus on death or failure. Otherwise, you're surrendering greatness to all the people too dumb to contemplate it. There was a moment when we were all working, and Andre said that thing about hot dogs, and we all laughed. And all at once I remembered Armando, and I felt guilty. He hasn't even had a funeral yet, and already we're working and laughing and carrying on like he was never here. His family, his friends. He's gone from their lives forever. That's so strange and so awful. The way the world just breezes right on by without you. And now you're thinking about how the world will go on without you, right? I guess so. This is why people get obsessed with the apocalypse. They want the world to die with them. We're all selfish. We hate the thought of everyone just moving on. Well, I would want my mom to, even if it meant she totally forgot me. I don't want her to be miserable. And Armando wouldn't want you to be. He'd want you to get the son of a bitch he was trying to get. He'd want you to finish the job. I can never tell if you're really talking to me or just trying to sell me on something. It's always like you just see me as one of the levers you can pull to get what you want. It kind of makes me hate talking to you. Unlike you, who is always honest and never has an ulterior motive. That story about how you were home and lonely at prom. Telling it in front of Armando, who made it his job to rescue women for a living. Oh, I'm such a disgusting troll, no one could ever love me. Planting that seed in his brain. All right. I'm Arthur Livingston's daughter. Is that what you're about to say again? Will just shrugged. Zoey rolled over and stared at the ceiling. There was a guy, an old scumbag boyfriend of my mom's who gave me the scar on my shoulder. I just got off the phone with my mom and she said he committed suicide. In his jail cell. So? Good riddance. Here's the thing. I had told Armando the story when they were doing my outfit. Could he have picked up the phone and ordered something like that done? No, Armando didn't have those kind of connections. That wasn't the business he was in. Yeah, I didn't think so. I wouldn't think about it anymore. See, there's a guy who deserves to be forgotten. You were in the room when I told that story, weren't you? You should try to get some rest. You'll need to be sharp to pull this off tomorrow. And where Armando couldn't pick up the phone and get somebody strangled in a jail cell and then have it faked to look like a hanging, you could. As I said, as far as I can see, it's just another rot brain doing the world a favor by taking himself out. Nothing more. And you promised me that's what it was. If you tell me now you didn't have him killed, I'll believe you. I think, said Will, pausing to choose his words, that he made the decision to die. And he made that decision the moment he decided to touch Arthur Livingston's daughter. Zoey covered her eyes with the blanket, something she used to do as a little kid. Oh my God, why? Why would you do that? If Arthur had heard about that incident back when it happened, Jezza Lewis would not have woken up to see another sunrise. Just collecting on an overdue bill, as far as I see it. You people live on a different planet. I keep having to remind myself of that. Lives just mean nothing to you. Will let silence hang in the room for a minute, then crossed his arms and let out a breath. My wife. She was killed. 3 years ago. Organized gang of thieves robbed a high-end jewelry store on Lattice Drive. Private security chased them. My wife was just a passerby, walking across an intersection. Pure coincidence. The pursuit blew through, one of the vehicles smashed right into her. Didn't even know if it was one of the good guys or bad guys, and I've never tried to find out. I'm sorry. This city. It's like that. The people are just background. Props in somebody else's adventure. That's all my wife was to them. A thud and a dent in their fender. A forgotten moment in somebody else's thrilling car chase. That's the way it is here, and it's always getting worse. And that it can't be allowed to continue. So, that's why you're so big on taking down Moledge? It's bigger than that. You know what tabula rasa means, right? The words. Clean slate? Isn't that it? I'm not going to bore you with the history, but Arthur and the other investors who snapped up all this land, they'd kind of gotten run out of Las Vegas due to some unscrupulous practices. So the idea was they just start their own Vegas, the way it used to be, back when it was Sin City and not just Disneyland for the elderly. Utah had this crazy libertarian governor at the time. Anyway, the point is, clean slate to them just meant no rules. But Korea changed Arthur. Tabula rasa, that phrase started to mean something different to him. He wanted it to be a clean slate, for everybody. A city that actually works. Jobs, clean air, no bureaucrats. It sounds like the kind of idea a little kid would have. Arthur was naive, in his own way. And he was too late. Even in those early days, organized crime had moved in, getting in on the ground floor. They had set up shop before the first McDonald's, the Gaines and the black markets and human traffickers. The Arthur Livingstons, in other words. Exactly. So I think all of this, the whole project with Raiden and this stupid dream about superpowers, he thought what so many guys like him had thought, that with enough money and technology, you could smooth out the flaws in society, like ironing the wrinkles out of a shirt, stamp out the crime like a comic book superhero, and turn this place into a utopia. But you know it doesn't work that way. No, because the bad guys are just as motivated to keep things like they are. Probably more so, but maybe I'm naive too, because I can't shake the idea that the whole world is watching us. When they broke ground out here, they called it the City of the Future. Like Tabula Rasa really is a preview of what the world is going to look like, and everybody's just waiting to see which way it goes. That's a lot of pressure. It's the burden we took on, that you took on. When I inherited all the money? When you were born. Get some sleep. 55. Zoey managed 4 hours. When she woke up, it was the morning of Tuesday, December 21st, the shortest day before the longest night. Her toilet bot played the news for her, and every feed was covering another aspect of the same story. From various man-in-the-street interviews, it became clear that the people of Tabula Rasa fell into roughly 3 camps in response to the terror threat. A. Those who were evacuating, enough to choke the highway leading out of town. B. Those who were out and about, camera ready, hoping to catch some of the action. C. Those who were just going about their day as normal, because the city was the city, and the threat of exotic violence didn't mean they could take a day off of work. One thing was for sure, for the private security firms in the city, this was Black Friday. The co-op was spread thin, every single customer presumably having demanded extra protection. They had ditched their black ties and overcoats for black tactical gear, though Zoey figured they could still have their ties on underneath, and every bank, casino, and other high-dollar target had a dozen of them at their door. But the biggest show of force was at the co-op headquarters itself. Ranks of men in terrifying black vehicles, figuring that letting their own office get leveled would surely be bad for business. To Zoey, it didn't look like nearly enough. The most alarming scene, though, was the 2 houses of worship. Volunteers had turned out by the hundreds, supplementing armed contractors they'd pooled their money to hire. That struck Zoey as madness, not because she wasn't religious, but because she knew those buildings could be put back together inside of a week, with the tech she saw around the city. Let Molech grind them to dust, who cares? God and Allah can stay in a hotel for a couple of weeks if they have to. But, she supposed, that was easy for her to say. She went to get dressed and found she had worked her way back around to the same jeans, awesome possum t-shirt, and cardigan that she'd arrived in 6 days ago, though at least they had been washed. She imagined the coroner examining her body later tonight, and also noting that she had died in a pair of red panties that said Shark Week across the front, with a cartoon great white on the butt. Carlton was already in the kitchen when she passed, ready to launch into breakfast. She asked him if he just waited there all night, but he said he had set Candy to alert him when someone else in the house was up and around in case they needed anything. Zoey thought that sounded like a form of slavery, but Carlton seemed to take pride in having thought of it, and asked her what she wanted. Well, it could be my final meal. What's the best thing you make? What was Arthur's favorite? Make that. Carlton busied himself making what appeared to be some kind of elaborate hamburger, while at the same time dropping parts of a whole-boiled chicken, egg yolks, and various other disgusting ingredients into a hand-cranked meat grinder that turned out a horrific-looking substance that Stench Machine pounced on with a fervor Zoey had never seen in the animal. Carlton had clearly been educating himself on fine cat food recipes. The burger turned out to be a seared beef patty topped with onion jam, bacon, and a peanut butter sauce, all on a bun of fried dough encrusted with potato chip crumbs. Zoey felt like it was the type of thing a person should be arrested for eating, and consuming such an obscenity at breakfast would surely keep her out of heaven later today. It was worth it. Soon, Zoe was heading toward the ballroom, espresso in hand, and arrived in a room that was eerily silent, smelling of fresh paint, cookies, and burned chemicals. For the moment, she had Santa's workshop to herself, the giant gadget-defecating caterpillar sleeping quietly in the center of the room. Zoe sipped her coffee and wandered over to the holographic displays that were showing an endless list of objects with indecipherable names. The text looked Russian to Zoe, with its backwards R's and such, but Will actually knew how to read Russian, for some reason, and told her the menus were still mostly nonsense and made-up words. The labels roughly translated to things like particle frac vapinator. She flicked through the menu, hundreds of items, each representing a gadget. She swiped down and down through the list until the screen stopped when it reached the bottom. The very last schematic on the indecipherable list was simply called Zoe. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Was this new? It was literally the only English word on the whole list. Had Echo seen it? Or Will? Why hadn't they mentioned it? From behind her, Wu said, "There you are. We need to go over the escape plan." Escape plan? If everything fails, the final branch of the plan, Plan Z we will call it, is I get you in a vehicle and drive you as far away from here as possible. How about we just make sure it doesn't come to that? We are not gods. We do not control the universe. All we can do is be ready for what it brings us. Come with me. They descended into the garage, where they found the armored sedan pointed at the door. The blue BMW escape car Bud had bought was now parked off in a corner, forgotten. Probably a $100,000 car, but they decided they didn't need it, so it gets discarded like a cheap toy. Insane. Wu said, "Get in." "I don't get what it is that we need to practice here. If everything goes to hell, you'll grab me and we'll get in the car and go." "You cannot assume I will still be available, or alive, to facilitate your escape. You need to know how to initiate the vehicle's emergency protocols. And we cannot assume you'll figure it out on the fly, when for all we know, at that moment, the mansion will be in flames and collapsing around you." Jesus, Wu. "Zoe, regardless of what happens, you cannot be surprised. Men like me and Will, who have a war background, know something about the world that you do not. In those moments of chaos, everything you thought you could depend on falls away. Everything turns upside down. Heroes turn out to be cowards, and vice versa. Your best laid plans fail. Your most haphazard improvisation saves your life. Friends turn out to be enemies. In the end, Zoe, you can trust nothing. You can only have another plan ready to go, one after another. Get in." Zoe slid into the driver's seat. The dash and windshield display lit up. "All right, so is there a voice command, or—" The door slammed closed on its own. The garage door began rolling upward. Zoe assumed she'd said something or hit a button. She took her hands off the wheel and glanced around the dash. Cancel. Stop. Stop what you're doing, car." Instead, the car lurched forward, tires squealing, flying toward the still opening door. "Stop! Hey, stop!" The door hadn't cleared enough for the car to pass, but the armored sedan wasn't going to wait. It ran through it, the rising door scraping the roof as it passed. The second door was completely closed. No matter. The armored sedan bashed through it. Chunks of debris piled on the hood as it flew out and down the back drive. "Hey, stop! Car, stop driving! Park! Brake! Engine off! Stop!" The car did not respond. Zoe grabbed the steering wheel and hit the brake. Doing either should have automatically rendered control to her. It did not. The car pulled itself into traffic, weaving in and out of morning commuters, professionals from Beaver Heights who were sipping tea and applying makeup on their way to the offices downtown for yet another Tuesday. And then they were into the suburbs, whipping past the churches and family restaurants and weed dispensaries. And Zoe suddenly knew where they were going. And she began to panic. She tried to scream for help, pleading for another commuter to block the sedan's path or run it off the road. But cars were remarkably soundproof these days. Each driver in a bubble that seals out the outside world. People playing music or listening to soft-spoken public radio shows. Commuters worried about parking and office politics and trying to recall if they had wheeled the trash out to the curb. The comforting little concerns that let us blot out the big things. No idea they were 2 feet away from a young woman slapping her window and mouthing wordless cries, trying to get their attention. They were through the suburbs now, heading into the city. Zoe desperately reared back with both feet and kicked at the driver's side window. The glass bounced and flexed, but held. This was glass intended to withstand an anti-tank rocket. It would be an all-day task even if she had power tools. and yet she still tried, because this was her life. She kicked the passenger side. She kicked the windshield. Who knows, maybe one piece of glass had a minute manufacturing flaw, or an invisible crack. Maybe it would trip some alarm in the auto drive and cause the car to stop or deviate from the course. It did not. As the buildings of downtown rose into view, she saw the ominous black countdown on the skyline. She punched the dash, smashing the glass panel readouts and maps and rearview monitors, hoping to damage some crucial component that would make the car stop short of its destination anywhere other than Molech's renovated hotel. The armored sedan smoothly hummed along despite its wounds, just as its designers had built it to do. They had done their job well. Her little bubble of panic bobbled along in the sea of indifference that was Fairfax Avenue. The twin black-clad pillars grew in the windshield. Zoey screamed and cried, and ripped the plastic inner panel from the driver's side door, finding only solid metal underneath. The car slowed and placidly reached the fire palace, turning down a ramp leading to a heavy steel door. It rolled open as she approached. They were, of course, expecting her. By the time the car rolled to a stop, the inside of the driver's side window was a pink smear of blood from Zoey's fists. When the door was yanked open, Zoey was cradling her hands, having turned her knuckles into a hamburger trying to punch her way out. Leaning into the door was Molech, wearing the ridiculous supervillain costume he'd probably paid 6 figures to have designed, a black costume that had been cut to leave most of his torso exposed, featuring cobalt highlights and a huge bright blue codpiece, and the sidekick he'd named Black Scott. Molech looked skeptical. "I'll be damned! He wasn't lying! Get her out!" Scott reached in and Zoey pushed herself backward, kicking at the reaching hands, pressing herself up against the passenger side door. Then that door was yanked open, and she tumbled out onto the oil-stained concrete. Someone laughed. A boot pushed her to the floor. Her arms were pulled behind her back, and she felt something metal go around her wrists. Molech circled the car, looking down at her, and said, "This here is what happens when you put blind trust in people. You Livingston crew, you let traitors continue in your midst. See, organizations, just like men, are subject to natural selection. If your organization is vulnerable to infections of disloyalty, it'll die." From the floor, Zoey choked out the word. "Who?" "Doesn't matter now, does it?" To someone standing nearby, Molech said, "She got implants? Anything inside her she's about to spring on us?" The bearded man who had examined Armando's body the day he died, whom Molech had called Doc, leaned over Zoey. He studied a gadget in his hand and said, "No, she's clean. Or she's unmodified anyway." Molech shook his head. "I don't like it." Scott said, "Seem too easy?" "Yeah, our man sneaking around inside the estate, rerouting the car. They had to know." Scott said, "Damn, man, she's a hell of an actress if so." Zoey rolled over and tried to sit up. Her hands were bound with some kind of wire, but it felt loose. If she could just get one hand free. Molech said, "Nah, they wouldn't let her in on it." "Well, maybe she's got like a bug or a tracking device on her that we can't detect. Something new." Doc interjected. "It would still have to send a signal back. This building is a dead zone. We're jamming everything." Molech said, "And she don't have a tiny bomb up her butthole?" Doc just shrugged, making it clear that if there had been, he would have mentioned it long before now. Molech said, "Maybe just to be sure, we ought to reach in there with a fishhook, pull her guts out her ass, turn her inside out." Scott said, "Man, it's past time to go, or we're going to get set up to coordinate with the countdown. Just stomp her head in and get it over with." "She might know something, even if she don't know she knows it." "Then stick her in the cage and let Doc work on her while we're gone. Let him reconnect some nerves, turn her body into a torture chamber." "Yeah, let's do that. Wait. No. Molech squinted again, the expression he apparently made when the gears in his head were turning. "No, that's what they'd expect me to do. Whatever plan they got, it's based on getting her inside my HQ, then us leaving her alone there. I bet that's the whole point." Scott was getting impatient. "Man, you can sit here and second-guess yourself all day. In fact, I bet that's what they want most of all. You pacing around and worrying about her instead of keeping your eyes on the prize." Molech nodded. "Yeah, screw it. Bring her with us." Zoey sat up and said, "But how do you know that isn't what we wanted you to do?" Molech leaned over and punched her in the jaw. Blood exploded into her mouth. She crashed to the floor, feeling sharp chunks like broken porcelain on her tongue. She spat 3 teeth and a gob of dark blood onto the oily concrete, then rolled over just in time to catch a boot to the face. Zoe's nose collapsed with a gut-turning crunch, and she had just enough time to feel a boot smash into her ribcage, bones cracking like eggshells, before she blacked out from the pain.